What if I told you that the American chestnut, once a proud part of American industry and history, has become functionally extinct? Why did this happen? What is its impact? And is there a path for restoration? Steve Delp, member of the board of directors of the American Chestnut Foundation's Pennsylvania and New Jersey chapter, joins us to break down those questions and more. That's all coming up right here, right now. I'm Sam Chen, and this is Face the Issues. Good evening and welcome to Face the Issues. The American chestnut, we're all familiar with it, but it is at risk. The question is why and what can we do to help preserve it and its future? We're joined tonight by Steve Delp, member of the board of directors of the American Chestnut Foundation, Pennsylvania and New Jersey chapter. Steve, welcome to Face the Issues and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much for having us.
It's a pleasure. Steve, let me start with the 30,000-foot question that I think all of our viewers watching this are thinking. We all know that song, Chestnuts Roasting on the Open Fire. Chestnuts were a part of my childhood growing up, especially around the holidays. But what is the American chestnut?
The American chestnut is the only member of the chestnut family that is native to North America. At one time, there were an estimated 4 billion American chestnuts in their historical range, which basically extended from Maine along the Appalachian Mountains down to Georgia. The American chestnut was a huge eastern forest tree. It had a nickname of the redwood of the East. They grew to a height of 120 feet. They had diameters of up to 15 feet. Very, very large tree, one of the dominant trees in the canopy of the eastern Appalachian forest. It was an important tree from the perspective that it was a strong hardwood, relatively lightweight. It was used for virtually all types of construction, whether it be for construction type timbers and things like that. It was used, they like to say it was the cradle to grave tree because cradles were made from chestnut wood and coffins were made from chestnut wood and everything else in between. It was very rot resistant. And it was a favorite tree and a critical tree through the development of our country and the construction of our infrastructure, our early infrastructure.
Wow.
So
what, I mean, that's an incredible history and obviously the role that it's played. You said for 1.4 billion of these trees, across that eastern seaboard. 4 billion. Yeah. What's happened then I'm assuming that number is not 4 billion anymore.
No.
What happened? Well,
right around the beginning of the 20th century, from early settlers, we were bringing chestnuts over from Europe and bringing chestnuts over from Japan and China and things because a lot of people really felt that they were superior in taste for consumption purposes and things like that. So we had been importing chestnut trees or bringing chestnut trees along as people migrated to America for 100 years prior to that, or 100 years plus prior to that. But in early 1900, in fact 1904, some trees that were infected with the blight were brought over from Asia. Some people say it was a Chinese chestnut, other people say it was a Japanese chestnut, but basically those trees in that section of the world evolved with the blight. So as they evolved, developed mechanisms to resist the impact of the blight. When that blight reached the American chestnuts, it started in the New York area. They had no natural resistance to that blight, and it basically, within 50 years, it basically decimated the entire population of American chestnuts from Maine to Georgia.
Wow. But how many trees are there now?
Well, there was 4 billion. It's considered a functionally extinct tree at this point because it can't grow to the heights and things that it did back before the blight. But there's still an estimated 200 million or so trees out there.
Massive drop. Massive drop.
Massive drop, and the difference now between most of those trees, there's a few isolated trees that are pretty large, but the vast majority of trees are what we call stump sprouts, and they grow to maybe a height of 20 feet before they ultimately get the blight and die back.
Wow. Okay. So this blight is something that these chestnuts from China, from Japan had as well, but they were resistant to it.
Correct.
The American chestnut, having never encountered it before, has not developed that resistance.
Correct.
How big of a problem is this? I mean, obviously the numbers speak for themselves.
Right.
But what's the impact of this if nothing is done?
Well, if nothing's done, again, these root systems from the old trees, the original trees, continue to put up shoots. Okay. But as it does that, there's an energy drain of that massive root system. So every time it sends up a shoot, it's decreasing in vigor, and they are slowly dying. Now it's taking them 100 years and probably perhaps some of them maybe another 100 years to ultimately die out, but every time they put up new shoots and they die back, it weakens those root systems, and ultimately there will be no American chestnuts.
Can you talk to us about the difference between American chestnuts, Chinese chestnuts, Japanese chestnuts, and so forth? I think most of us who are uncultured and ignorant, like myself, we just think chestnuts are chestnuts are chestnuts.
Yeah.
But you said the trees are slightly different. You said that people have talked about the difference in tastes between them. They look different if you look at the photo. Can you walk us through some of the differences?
Sure. Again, the American chestnut is the tallest. It's what we call a timber type of structured tree. In other words, they grow straight up and they don't stop till they reach 120 feet in height, basically. All of the other chestnuts are more of what we like to describe as an orchard type tree. Their maximum heights are probably in the 60, 70 foot range, and they have more of a spreading characteristic to them, similar to a regular old apple tree, that type of thing. So that's the difference. One's a very tall, straight growing tree, and the other ones are more bushy and more spread out, like a shade tree in your yard.
Interesting. Okay. So, I mean, people wouldn't be planting American chestnuts in their front yard, per se.
They could, they did years ago. They just get a lot bigger than the Chinese and European chestnuts and things like that. But there's still a lot of people that have Chinese, Asian chestnuts, European chestnuts and things. There's a growing market for edible chestnuts in the United States. So all of those chestnuts are here to stay, and they all have their niche. The primary niche of the American chestnut, again, is to replace that timber type tree that also produced massive mass crops every year for wildlife and things like that. So
the chestnuts that we get at the store, right? If you go to the store, you get chestnuts. Are those a specific kind, or you can get all the different varieties?
Most of what you see in the stores are European chestnuts.
Interesting.
I think Italy is one of the largest producers and importers of chestnuts into the United States. On the other hand, most of the chestnut trees you see in people's yards and things now on the old farmsteads and things like that, most of them are Chinese chestnut trees. The Chinese chestnut is the most resistant of all to the blight, correct. So you see more of them out there than any of the others.
And is there a difference in the product? Are there some that aren't as edible as others?
They all taste good to me.
That's fair.
So yeah, they're all very good to eat.
Yeah.
So
that's fair enough. We're going to go to break in a bit, and then we're going to come back and talk about solutions. But before we do that, I just want to round up this section by asking you, all these different kinds of chestnuts, the trees are different, the fruit perhaps tastes the same. Your organization, the organization that you work with, the American Chestnut Foundation, your mission is to preserve the American chestnut.
Right. Our mission is to preserve the American chestnut, but primarily to reestablish it in its historical natural range, and restore it to the position as one of the prominent forest trees in the eastern Appalachian mountain range.
And that's, to your point earlier, you said it's from Maine all the way down to Georgia.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
And we'll get into the solutions here in a bit, but is that something that is possible with all the other chestnuts trees? Do you think this is something where we can get a coexistence between these trees?
Sure. Primarily because, again, the other chestnuts will never compete in the forests with the oaks and with the poplars and some of the other tall forest type trees, timber type trees that exist there. You could plant Chinese chestnuts or Japanese chestnuts or whatever, and some of them will survive for so long if they're grown in an area where everything's of equal size, but eventually they will fall behind. They will be shaded out by all of the other trees in the eastern forest, and then they will not be successful.
Wow, that's good insight. Steve, thank you for breaking that down for us. We're going to go to the break. When we come back, I want to talk about the solutions that have not worked and the ones that your organization are working on now.
Right.
Well, don't go away. We'll be right back.
Face the Issues is produced and recorded in the studios of Lighthouse TV. Positively different.
Welcome back to Face the Issues. Steve, thank you again for joining us. I want to move to solutions. And so we left off at the last segment talking about your organization and what the mission was. And you said it's not just to preserve the American chestnut, but to restore it to its original area in the Appalachian region.
Right.
Talk to me a little bit about the organization. It's the American Chestnut Foundation. You're specifically with the Pennsylvania, New Jersey chapter. But I imagine that means that there's chapters all across the country, or at least in this region. Talk to me about the organization and what the goals and the work of the organization are.
Okay, there's roughly 18 chapters, basically up and down the Appalachian states. The American Chestnut Foundation is headquartered in Asheville, North Carolina. It's a nonprofit organization with a staff of scientists who are basically trying to bring back the American chestnut. They're working in partnership with the State University of New York, the Environmental Services and Forestry School in Syracuse. They're the ones that developed the most promising tree for restoration of the American chestnut.
Okay. This work has been going on for a while. What has been tried thus far? What have we seen that works, and what have we seen that does not work?
There's basically a three-prong approach to trying to restore the American chestnut, and these strategies have been working in conjunction with each other in one way, shape, or form for around 40 years now. We call it the three-burr process. One is breeding, basically back-crossing to try to retain the resistance of the Chinese chestnut, but at the same time retain all of the physical appearance and characteristics of the American chestnut. So we call that breeding, back-crossing. That's one of the B's in three burrs. The second is biocontrol. There are strains of the blight. The blight is a fungus that basically gets under the bark or into the bark of the chestnut. It secretes an enzyme, or it secretes an acid as a metabolic byproduct, and that acid, called oxalic acid, that basically destroys the cells of the thin living bark layer of the tree, and that's what ultimately gurls the tree and kills the tree. There are strains of that fungus that are less lethal or less virulent than than strains that are killing the trees. And if an American chestnut is infected with one of those strains, they can ward it off to a certain degree.
Interesting.
So there's work going on to determine if there's some way they can control these less virulent fungi to coexist with the tree. Because one of the things they've realized that if a tree is infected with a less virulent type of form of the blight, that will outcompete the virulent forms, and it will basically kind of save the tree.
Interesting. Okay.
The problem is it's like herding cats. It's hard to control.
Herding fungi.
Exactly. So that's the difficulty with the biocontrol,
Sure.
the primary biocontrol strategy that we're, again, working in parallel with the breeding program. Mm-hmm. The third is relatively new in that regard, especially it's really come on over the last, 10, 15 years as the strides have been made in genetic research and bioengineering. So the third burr is bioengineering, and that's basically trying to understand what genes, what chromosomes, what genes of the American chestnut are responsible for controlling the blight, or responsible for resisting the blight, that sort of thing. They learned, I think it was around 15 years ago, that again, the chemical that is damaging and ultimately killing the trees is oxalic acid. There are some agricultural geneticists that are very familiar with all kinds of different plants, and they were familiar with genetic mechanisms that can cause the tree to do things that it normally wouldn't do.
Well, that's interesting.
For instance, what they decided, what their strategy, what they finally decided to do was insert a gene from a wheat plant, a common wheat, into the DNA of the American chestnut. What that one wheat gene does, because it does the same thing for wheat plants, and there's the same types of genes in many other plants, that gene allows the American chestnut to create an enzyme that will essentially neutralize the oxalic acid that the blight produces as it's basically feeding on the cambium, the outer bark layer of the tree. So that enzyme basically detoxifies the blight and allows the tree to basically resist the damage caused by the blight.
Wow, that's fascinating. And on the website of your organization, it talks about this goal. It says our goal is to develop a blight-resistant American chestnut tree via back-cross methods of breeding for the restoration of locally adapted breeding populations of the species in the forests of the Mid-Atlantic. And it talks about these back-cross generations that have been established that allow this restoration of the American chestnut. I'm assuming the work is, I mean, this is why you have all these scientists in the labs. Right. I'm assuming this work is you're trying to create it through a combination of those three different efforts, the breeding, the biocontrol, and the bioengineering. Or are we looking at one avenue as the solution, or a combination of the three?
Well, it's basically whichever crosses the finish line first, basically. Now, the way it's turning out, it does look like it's going to be a combination. It looks like there's still a place, and there's still going to be a component of the process going forward where the back-crossed trees are going to be utilized in conjunction with the what we call the transgenic tree, the bioengineered tree. Because again, this is very early right now. Everything's being done in highly regulated environments. The Department of Agriculture, the Environmental Protection Agency, and the Food and Drug Administration regulate any genetically modified materials.
Okay.
And the American chestnut that we have with the wheat gene in it is considered a modified, genetically modified organism. So it's very highly regulated at this point. But it looks like there's a good possibility at this point in time that we're going to get approval to use that material, use those trees. We call deregulate that genetic material, and there's already strategies being developed and plans and implementation of some of these things in place already to utilize again the genetically modified tree, which is called the Darling 58 tree, and also the backcross trees that we've been backcrossing for the last 40 years.
Wow. Is there a timeline for this? Is there a point which we have to have it done before a certain point, or we might stand to lose the American chestnut?
I don't think we're in imminent position to lose the tree, because like I said, there's probably 200 million out there in diminished form in the forest. They're all over the place. The Blue Mountain here in the northern Lehigh County, northern Berks County, has tons of little chestnut trees. So I don't think we're really facing that timeline imminently. The timeline we're all watching right now is we're hoping for federal deregulation of the Darling 58 tree sometime this summer.
Okay.
That is a huge milestone.
That'll open up a lot of doors and opportunities for you.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
How hopeful are you to see that?
We're all extremely hopeful for that. Again, it's gone through all of the Federal Register comment periods and things like that, and there's a lot of groups in favor of deregulating that tree. Some of the environmental groups that sometimes might be resistant to some of these things, like the Sierra Club, have come out in support.
Oh wow!
Of
so you're looking at like a broad, bipartisan kind of full spectrum support for this then.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, that's good news. Steve, I appreciate you sharing about that, and appreciate the efforts that you and your colleagues are making to bring the American chestnut back. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Face the Issues. Steve, thank you again for your time today, for the work that you and your colleagues do. I want to ask you, you spent your career working for OSHA.
Most of it, yes.
And then you've transitioned into some, you had a Christmas tree farm, and now you're doing this work with the American chestnut. What made you want to get into saving the American chestnut? Well,
when I worked for the federal government, for OSHA, my job was basically twofold. There's a big technical component of occupational safety and health, exposure to chemicals and things like that, and all of the safety issues, construction safety and manufacturing safety and things like that. So there was a large technical component of that. And at the same time, one of my last responsibilities was basically outreach, what we call compliance assistance. And I was one of the liaison people for compliance assistance. I was no longer a compliance officer. I'd go out and basically say, I'm from the government, I'm here to help you, basically. But a key component of that is developing relationships and convincing people that this was the right thing to do. And basically there's a large parallel from the technical components of this project and the public outreach and convincing people that this is probably what we should be doing out there. So it meshed well. It gave me something to do after I retired. And I'm still working with plants, just no longer Christmas trees. So it was a good fit.
Do you feel through your career, whether at OSHA or otherwise, that what you've done and the things that you've learned are helping you now as you work with the American Chestnut Foundation?
Absolutely, yes, yes.
And the other question, I mean, we get so many young people who, they think, when I get out of school, I gotta find that one thing I'm gonna do, for the rest of my life, or my education has to feed into what I'm gonna do. What advice do you give to somebody now that you've been through your career, you've retired, you continue to work, really? I mean, you're doing it unpaid now with the American Chestnut Foundation, but you're still continuing to work towards causes. What advice do you give to young people who are maybe beginning their career journey?
Oh, I don't know. Don't be afraid to be a jack of all trades. There's a lot of there's a lot of value in being a generalist and being able to do both the people side of things and also the technical side of things.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic advice. And even what you said today about how you've got scientists on your team who are working on this breathing and biocontrol and bioengineering, and then there's an outreach side to this where we got to get the community to buy in. I just think our lives aren't segmented. Our lives are interdisciplinary, right. And it's smart to pursue that.
Sure.
Steve, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for the work that you do and for your time.
And again, thank you for having us here to be able to explain a little bit about this.
Yeah, it's our pleasure. My guest again is Steve Delp, a member of the board of directors from the American Chestnut Foundation's Pennsylvania and New Jersey chapter. I want to thank Steve and his colleagues at the American Chestnut Foundation for the work that they do day in and day out. And of course, thank you to each of you for joining us. We hope to see you back here next week as we unpack another issue. Until then, my name is Sam Chen. On behalf of all of us here at Face the Issues, thank you and good night.